Hi class, this is iCOM 212 Image Design, and this is your instructor, Megan McNames. In this video, I'm going to talk about design principles. So last week, you looked at Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory provides laws that explain how the mind groups and organizes visual information. And what we're going to do this week is build on that and talk about design principles. So the Gestalt laws explain how the mind groups, and the design principles are going to give us rules for designing, knowing how the mind groups. So Gestalt theory gives us the explanation. Design principles help us take advantage of how the mind understands what it sees so that we can create successful designs. So unlike Gestalt laws, which simply explain what the mind does when it sees things, design principles actually provide rules that govern effective design. And of course, they're based on the Gestalt laws. But what's interesting about the design principles is they actually apply to any type of design, not just visual design. There's other classes that I teach that aren't visual design centric in which I teach the design principles. And we'll get to that in a minute. So this week, we're not going to look at the design elements, which you also read about. These are forms that the mind recognizes. You use the design elements to achieve the principles, so you will see the names of the elements come up in this lecture. But design elements are specific to visual design, and I'm going to rely on the readings to help you understand what the design elements are. And I'm going to focus on the design principles instead, because the design principles, I think, benefit from further explanation. So before we talk about the design principles, let's back up a minute and just talk about design. What is design? Well, design is a process that you undertake to create something communicative. So the difference between art and design, for example, is that art is expressive. Art can exist and be considered good art without communicating a message, or with communicating a message that not everyone is going to get. Design cannot be like this. Design is not expressive. When you design, you're not expressing your own tastes and your own desires, which is why you'll hear me constantly say, I don't care about your opinion. When we talk about critiques, if you say, I like it, I'm going to say, why should we care about your opinion? Design is not about being self-expressive. It's not about your individual desires and preferences. Design is about undertaking a process to create something, whether it's a poster or a film or a website, that communicates a message. And so design is really about the audience. It's about creating something the audience is going to understand. So when we talk about critique in this class, everything will come back to the audience. Is the color usage appropriate to the audience? Not, do you like the colors? So we can split design into two types of design, what we call big D design and what we can think of as little d design. So big design with a capital D, we give it a capital letter because this is planning for entire systems. This is design on an epically large scale. Little d design, we refer to it in the lowercase d design because it's a smaller way of performing design. In little d design, we're not planning an entire system, we're just planning for one communicative component of some system. So we might design a visual style for an app, we would be conducting little d design. But if we have to design the entire app and figure out who it's for and how they're going to use it and what functions it should have, then we're performing big D design. So in the digital, well, actually I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me get to the next slide. So here you can sort of see the difference between the two. Big D design is the big pink circle, the overall concept and the user experience. When you design on the big D scale, you're considering the overall experience your audience or user or reader is going to have. You're thinking about what the website or mobile app or employee program does as a whole and who it's for. You're going to be confronting a problem and considering the best way to solve that problem. In little d design, we have the little red circles. These are component design activities. So these are the activities you undertake that eventually lead up to the whole. You come up with a plan for the entire system and then you have to make its parts. Little d is the parts. So the little d design activities, like laying out the web pages or designing a logo or choosing a consistent color scheme, they're going to help the website express what it does and who it's for. But that's already been considered in the big D design. What you do on the little d design level might make a website more attractive, and as you know from your reading on affectivity, it might help people feel that the website works better, but these activities are only undertaken after the big D design has been determined. So if you've had me for your other classes, or if you'll have me again for some of the other digital media minor classes, what you'll see is that we tend to focus on the overall concept and user experience, and then we perform little d design tasks last. So in my interactivity design class, for example, you design an interactive experience, and it's not until the very end of the class that you start laying out the pages, designing the logos, and choosing consistent color schemes. These are component design activities. You can't complete these until you know what the entire system is supposed to do. So in Big D design, this is really the human-computer interaction process. We plan an entire system, and we start here with requirements. And that means we have to research who the system is for. Then we have to design alternatives. What is it going to do? What is it going to look like? Then we prototype it. We make an example. And then we evaluate it. We give that example to our audience and we see what they do with it. And we see if it communicates the message or helps them understand what they're supposed to understand or helps them undertake a task they're supposed to undertake. You'll learn more about this in pretty much every other class in the minor. So in Big D design, we're looking at systems. And the system could be something like a promotional or e-commerce website. It's a system because it's a collection of pages and actions that the user can or can't take. So on an e-commerce website, you'll have dozens or hundreds or even thousands of pages showing products, and you have to figure out how they do that. Does each product get its own page? How are the products organized? Are they organized by what gender they're for? Are they organized by price? Can they be organized by both? What kind of actions can the user take? Can the user add things to a cart? Can they take things out of the cart? Can they not take things out of the cart? Designing a system involves a lot of these big questions about how what you're making is going to behave. If you're designing a mobile app, for example, that's a system. A mobile app is a system because it's a collection of pages and actions the user can and can't take, just like the e-commerce example. What about a video game? Well, a video game is also a system. So video game designers who come up with the concept of the video game and flesh it out are engaging in Big D design. Video games are systems because it's just a collection of environments and characters and actions the user can or can't take. So in a video game environment, Big D design asks questions like, where does the game take place? How do people play it? Do they play it with a joystick? Do they play it with a Kinect system? What actions can they take? Does this world use real-world physics, or does it use another type of physics? Can users skip ahead? If a user doesn't complete a mission, what happens then? These are all Big D design questions. And so the problems that you're solving with Big D design are going to look something like this. This is actually a project that I worked a little bit on this summer. Healthcare billing companies want to increase the percentage of bills that are actually paid. You are probably going to be shocked to find out that a huge percentage of healthcare bills that are billed out to patients don't actually get paid. So I worked with a client who is trying to fix that. They're trying to create a mobile app through which you can pay your bill that gives you incentives for actually paying your bill. Problem might look something like this. A university wants students to share their work outside of the classroom. A lot of universities are working on systems like this. They're making systems where instead of turning your homework in to your instructor, you turn your homework in or your papers into a system, and other instructors can see your work and other students can see your work. This is most helpful for universities that are churning out a lot of academic research. So as an undergraduate, if you conducted research, if you wrote an honors thesis, for example, it could be put into one of these systems and more people could learn from your work. Another Big D design problem might look something like this. Animal shelters have a hard time keeping track of the animals in their care. This is a problem that I'm currently working on. So I have to provide some concept for a system that solves this. I can't solve these problems by making a logo or making a single web page. I have to think about an entire system that solves the problem. So let me give you an example of Big D design. I told you I'm working on that last problem, and I'm working on a project that my partner and I call Rescue. And what we want to do is we want to help animal rescue organizations keep track of their animals and promote their animals. Right now it can be very hard. I have a family member who owns a dog rescue, and it's very difficult for her to keep track of her animals. She puts them in a Google or an Excel spreadsheet, and it's very hard for her to market her animals. If she wants to market her animals, if she can put them on Pet Finder, she can put them on Petango, she can put them on Facebook, but she has to spend time uploading the pictures and the stories to each one of these. So I want to solve that problem for her. And my concerns are big conceptual concerns, like who's going to use this and where. If I solve her problem, could county shelters use it? County shelters have about 10 times as many animals as she does. Could I build something that would be good for both of them? Where are they going to use this? Are they going to use it at the shelters? Do they need to be able to bring this to adoption events? Do they need to be able to bring this to rescue situations where they're going into someone's house? I need to figure out what they need and want. I'm not really sure. This is where I am in my research right now, is trying to figure out what animal organizations need and want. Do they need to keep track of microchip numbers? Do they need to keep track of vet visits? Do they need to keep track of the origins of these animals? I don't know. I have to find out. What kind of platform are they going to use? Is this something they can use on a phone, or do they need more space? Do they need to use it on a desktop? Do they need to be able to switch back and forth between the two? And then, of course, I have to figure out the functionality. What does it do? What do I do? Do I take a picture of the dog and then type the info in? I got to figure that out. And then I need to test it. So that's an example of going through the Big D design process, and you're going to do a lot of that in this minor. Little D design is smaller. Little D design has smaller problems. So in Little D design, we're just designing a component of a larger system. So I'll give you another example. I worked on a project this summer called Scrub Pay. And this is the solution, the proposed solution to the problem of medical billing. Now, the concept and experience of this product have already been determined, and I was not involved in that. I was just asked to come in and design some screens. So the whole concept was already made. The system was already made. I just had to figure out, how do I make it look nice? What colors do I choose? What typefaces do I choose? What kind of layout's going to look nice? So in a Little D design problem, you're not going to have these big arching problems, like how do I make something easier for a whole group of people? You're going to have little problems, like how do I make this look better? How do I make this one page a little bit easier to use? How do I make this logo more communicative? So in the Scrub Pay example, the system was already created, and these are wireframes of what the system should look like based on what it should do. So I was just brought in at the very end of the process to take these and turn them into this, which is real screens that you can put on an app, and this is what people will see when they log in on their phone. So in Little D design, the system is made, and you're taking one part of it and you're making it better. So I'm just designing what these pages look like. All I did was take this and make it prettier. So that's Little D design. The system was already made. I just got the wireframes and an explanation of what it was, and I had to make it look nicer. So in Big D design and Little D design, sometimes you're going to participate in both types of designs. Sometimes you'll do both for the same project, and sometimes you'll just participate in one. So with the rescue example, I'm actually going to participate in both. I'm going to develop the system, to figure out what it is and who it's for and how it works, and then I'm going to make it look nice. Sometimes you just participate in one, such as in the Scrub Pay example, where I was just given examples of the system and told to make it look nicer. The goal of the digital media minor is actually to prepare you to participate in Big D design and to prepare you to participate in system building. So our goal is for you to be able to do what I'm doing with Rescue, for you to go out and see a problem and solve it. That's how a lot of companies like Amazon, Zappos, Google, that's how they were all created, by people who saw a problem and developed a system as a solution. So that's what the digital media minor is about. But to do so, it helps for you guys to know some of the rules and skills of little d design. It helps for you to know what tools are available to you. So this class is called Digital Image Design, and that points to a very little d design subject matter. In fact, a couple years ago when this class was taught, we didn't talk about design at all. The whole class was taking pictures and editing them in Photoshop. The title points to that kind of treatment. Digital video design and digital audio design point to the same kind of treatment. So the difficulty with this class is I want to educate you in big D design, and I want you to be prepared to develop systems. But it helps to develop systems if you can do some of the little d design as well. When you're designing a system, you have to know what kind of little d design you're going to need, and you're going to have to choose the appropriate people to conduct those little d design activities. So my goal for this class is for you to learn digital image design on a little d scale so that you'll be prepared to implement image design on the system scale. So you're going to create designs of systems in 201, 210, 211, 375, and 495. 375 and 495 are the two required classes out of that list. So my goal in this class is to help you be efficient and effective at communicating with images on the little d design scale so that you can implement them on the system scale in those classes. So when you come up with an idea for a system, you can actually make it. You can actually make it look nice. So I always say in the digital media minor, though, we don't want you to be a designer. We want you to be a creative director. We don't want you just to go get a job tweeting for a company. We want you to be the person at that company who determines what social media should be used. We don't want you to just go get a job tweeting. We want you to go get a job where you're going to question whether you should be tweeting at all, and if so, what you should be tweeting. We want you to be inventors, strategists, and visionaries. I don't want you to go get a desk job designing pamphlets for the rest of your life, because you're better than that. I want you to go get a job designing pamphlets for a year and then show the company what great knowledge you have about system design so that you'll soon become the creative director, and it will be up to you to determine the systems. Someone else will move the boxes around on the page. So let's talk about design principles. Design principles are attributes that you want to achieve when you're designing. The principles actually apply to all forms of design. For example, balance is a design principle. When we're talking about visual design, balance means making something that's symmetrical or asymmetrical and determining where things are placed on the page. But in a system, you could think about balance as fairness. And we'll look at examples throughout this lecture. The design elements, which I'm not going to cover specifically, are components of a design. So elements are used to achieve the principles. These are forms the mind recognizes. They're specific to visual design, like shape. You use shapes to achieve the design principles. Let's talk about the design principles. What I'm going to do in this section is break all of the principles up into examples. For each principle, I'm going to show you an example of graphic design, which means magazine or poster design, web or mobile design, workplace culture, and photo composition. And the reason I'm showing you these 4 different kinds of designs is because I want you to understand that the design principles really are applicable across fields. Whether you go into graphic design, photo composition, or you become an HR manager at a workplace, you can use the design principles to create a good design, a good outcome. So I want to show that by using all these different examples. So the design principles, we're going to focus on the principles that affect design as a whole. I'm not going to give examples of the internal relationships on the right because many of them you've actually covered in Gestalt theory because they're based on Gestalt theory. Let's talk about the first, unity or harmony. Your textbook uses the term unity. Harmony is a similar concept that they really do not discuss. Unity is when the elements of several designs belong together. They're sufficiently similar to constitute a singular whole. So when you get a postcard from Ball State, You should immediately be able to tell it's from Ball State. It'll have the same colors, typefaces, and pictures that you see on their website. That's unity, creating different elements that appear to go together. A postcard, a poster, a website. Harmony is the same idea, but it's just on one page. So you're making one page look like it goes together. And unity or harmony is made using design elements. So using similar shapes creates unity and harmony. Using similar typography creates unity or harmony. Using similar color creates unity or harmony. So let's look at this example. This is a conceptual project for Martin College, and these are 3 posters that the designer has created that would be hung up, separate from each other. And you can see that across the posters there is unity, and within the posters there is harmony. So immediately you can tell that these 3 posters are related because they are structured similarly. They each feature a prominent face with the M shape underneath, the same typeface, and similar colors, which are these sort of combo pastel neon, if you can imagine such a thing, colors. And they're the primary colors. But within each poster, you have similarities. So the M that forms the colored box is the same as the M from the logo. The typeface that features the message is the same typeface from the logo. The smile of the people's faces matches the sort of smile of the M shape across the top. So we're repeating shapes, we're repeating typefaces, we're repeating colors, and as a result, these designs look harmonious. Let's look at a mobile app. This is Swarm, a Foursquare product. And across pages, we have a ton of unity, but within pages, we have a ton of harmony. Now, when we talk about mobile and we're talking about something people interact with, you actually have unity and harmony across behaviors. This is what's so fascinating to me about designing products like this. And in iCOM 211, interactivity design, you're going to be working with this concept. But here we have a honeycomb shape, and it's used repeatedly. Instead of a circle, always a honeycomb is used. So we have the honeycomb shape repeated here. We have it repeated in all of the profile pictures. We have it repeated in this button. The other interesting thing here is anything that's round is clickable. So these are buttons, they're round, they're clickable. This is a button, it's round, it's clickable. These are icons, they're roundish, and they're clickable. And so you learn throughout the pages of the mobile experience that anything that's roundish, you can click on. Anything that's orange clicks. So anything that's written in orange text, you can touch it. So you learn unity, anything orange you can touch, it will do something. Even in work culture, if you are an HR director and you're trying to create a good workplace culture, you can use the idea of unity or harmony. For example, everyone has to follow the same workplace guidelines. That creates harmony. Everyone has equality if they all have to follow the same workplace guidelines. A workplace where one person gets to do whatever they want and everyone else gets in trouble for it is disharmonious. It's not unified. I'm sure some of you have worked at a place like that. This is a photo set by Kunrong Chen. It's called Daily Exercise, and it's a series of photos of people exercising. They're unified by perspective. All of these pictures are taken from above, and that creates unity. It's pretty clear these pictures were taken by the same person because of that unified concept. Let's look at variety, also called contrast. You want to use contrast for emphasis. Two things that are different create harmony. So make something you want people to look at stand out by making it different. And again, you're going to use the design elements. So you can have a shape that's different. You can have typography that's different. You can have a texture that's different. You can have colors that are different. They're all going to stand out on your design. So if you look at this cover of the Washingtonian magazine, we see difference. We have all this food that's very colorful circling around the outside of the page. It's harmonious. But then we have this color contrast. We have white. The Washingtonian name is in white, so it stands out and draws our attention. In the center, we have typography that is scribbled. It's handwritten. It stands out from that very computerized font across the top. So we have type contrast in the middle. So our eyes are drawn. There's three major elements here: the beautiful, colorful food, the Washingtonian name, and the Where Foodies Shop typography treatment. Washingtonian and Where Foodies Shop stand out because they're different. If we look at this mobile app, this is Instagram, and you'll see that there's this very sort of lightness to the design. It's all this light blue and gray and really light gray and white. And then at the bottom we have a black gray bar. It's black, it's different, it's heavier, it stands out. And in the center we have one icon that's surrounded in blue. Why is this one icon blue and the others are black? Well, it's different. The house, the little compass, the little chat bubble with the heart, and the person, they're all gray and black because they do the same thing. If you click it, it takes you to a place. But if you click the blue icon, it takes you to a tool. So we have contrast. This middle button does something completely different from all the other buttons, and so it looks completely different. In the example of work culture, again, if you were an HR person, you were trying to create a good work culture, if you wanted to have variety, you might have something like Casual Fridays. Just kidding, no one cares about Casual Fridays. But you might have something like Personal Project Fridays. So companies like Google are very well known for giving their employees one day of the week to work on personal projects. So projects that they are personally interested in that benefit the company. This is how a lot of Google ideas are made. Things like Google Doodle. You know, someone on their free day was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had pictures instead of, and that's how it happened. So this is variety. You do the grind Monday through Thursday, and on Friday you get to do something different. And the concept here is that you'll be more productive if you don't have to constantly do stuff for other people. In this image, we have contrast. What I love about this image is that it shows motion, but we have clear contrast. The figure of the chimpanzee stands out against the green, fuzzy background of the jungle. So it's very clear right away, this is an image about the chimpanzee. And then we have that great red mouth that just draws your attention. Red is complementary to green. It's opposite green on the color wheel, which means it pops against a green background. So our eye is immediately drawn to this chimpanzee's face because of contrast. Okay, hierarchy and dominance. So basically what this means is that one element in your composition must be the primary focus. The rest has to be increasingly less important. So the human brain, as you know from Gestalt theory, as you know from theories of perception, believes that anything that's big, colorful, closer, or coming right toward us appears important. And we want to leverage this in design. So in this design, we have what's called a dominant element. Here in the center, Swan Lake and the beautiful ballerina are the dominant element. They are the biggest thing here. Nothing even comes close to the size of the ballerina wrapped up in the text. Then, of secondary importance, we have the date of this performance, and then of tertiary importance, we have the place, motion theater. So the designer has had to decide what's most important here, and then what's next important and what's least important. Actually, least important, you have this little bit up here. It's so tiny, it's the least important thing. You can totally understand the message of this poster without reading that, so it becomes very small. Let's look at a mobile example. This is again Instagram. What's the most important thing here? Well, what is Instagram about? Instagram is all about sharing pictures, so of course, the picture is the biggest thing that you see on the screen at all times. Always pictures, because that's what you come here to see. Of secondary importance is the information about the picture. Of tertiary importance is something really tiny like the timestamp. In the work culture example, You might implement hierarchy or dominance by having somebody who's designated to make decisions on each project. My brother designs motion graphics and CGI for movie trailers. I think I've mentioned that before. And the way his company works, they take turns being the project manager. So on one project, he is the little d designer. He gets a sheet that says what the project is. He meets with the team and they tell him what they want him to do. They tell him specifically, we want the type to be white, we want it to disappear like it's smoke. They tell him exactly what they want and he goes and does it. But then sometimes it's his turn to be the project manager and he gets to tell the others what he wants. He comes up with the ideas and they implement it. So in the work culture, you might have hierarchy by making someone who's designated as the boss. And then their ideas become dominant. This is a photograph, an award-winning photograph from immediately after the earthquake in Haiti of a woman being dug out from the rubble. And immediately you can tell that she is the primary focus. Of secondary importance are the people who are swarming around her to help her, and of tertiary importance is the environment that she's in. So immediately, because there's a figure in this space and she's kind of in central focus and you see her face first, she is dominant. She is the focus, what we call the focus of this picture. And then in this example, this is an example of kind of doing it the opposite. Nicolette is small, and in a way, the hierarchy here is that the empty space becomes very important. The empty space is almost the primary focus. When you first see this picture, probably the first thing you notice is actually lack of subject matter. And then you see Nicolette, and that is done to communicate the message of emptiness of her life in this orphanage. So really quickly, deviating from the design principles a little bit, I want to talk about focus and the rule of thirds. So if you are not watching the videos, I guess I will find out this week that you haven't been watching them because this is not in your textbook. But focus and the rule of thirds, when we're talking about photographs, you want to have a dominant element just like you do in design, just like the ballerina was in the poster. But where you place the focus is different in photo composition. It really matters. Placing the focus, it matters all the time, but it's especially important in photo composition. Placing the focus in the center of an image is typically not visually interesting. The rule of thirds is a rule kind of like a design principle that helps photographers to place the focus in an interesting manner. So in the rule of thirds states that you break a photograph up into 3 columns and 3 rows, 9 squares. Instead of placing your subject matter here in the center, you want to try to place the focus of your picture, which is typically the subject matter, across one of the lines and at one of these points if you can. So this is a great example. This is a photograph, the Flying Cholitas. It's a team of wrestlers, kind of like luchadors in Mexico, and they're all women. And she's placed along this rule of thirds line. This is a photograph of a woman who tried to rescue. Well, you see the image of a child in the mirror. This is a child who was born with water on the brain and was not treated properly. And so this woman personally flew to where the girl was and tried to get her treatment and took care of her. And it was really the first time in this little girl's life. She had been abandoned, I believe, by her parents, where she had a real caretaker who was fighting for her health. And so in this image, if we break it up into the rule of thirds, you see that the girl's face is pretty close to this crosshair right here, and the mirror that we are drawn to is right along this line, and then the face of the woman actually touches the line as well. This is an example of an award-winning photo from a series on the floods in Pakistan in 2010, I believe. And you'll see that the subject, again, is along the rule of thirds line. He's not in the center. This creates focus. He's clearly the focus of the picture. He's the only human character that we see, and his skin tone stands out against the muddiness of the background, but he's along the rule of thirds line. He's not in the center. Let's get back to the design principles. Proportion. Proportion is working with size relationships in order to create hierarchy and focus. So it's very similar to hierarchy and focus. Hierarchy is about making sure something is dominant in your picture and much larger than everything else, typically at least twice the size of everything else, and then making sure everything else is subordinate to that. Proportion is how you might do that. So if we go back to that Swan Lake example, the ballerina is our primary focus. She's got text sort of implemented into, incorporated into her body shape. And then of secondary importance is the date. Of tertiary importance is the logo. And if we break these areas up into squares and we sort of assign each area a square, you'll see the difference in proportion. So the ballerina is about 3 times larger than the date and time, and she's like 9 times larger than the logo. So proportion tells us that something needs to be the main focus. It needs to be the largest. To make something a focus, you use proportion. Sometimes you can implement proportion. So in this mobile example, this is a screenshot from a game that Google created called Ingress. It's really cool. If you guys are into alternate reality games, things like that, I suggest you download it. It uses Google Maps. It's a game that you actually use on your cell phone while you're outside. So while you're outside and you're walking, it shows you on the screen where you are in Google Maps, but instead of seeing a Google map, you see this sort of souped up Google map that exists in this alternate reality where you're fighting aliens, and you have to walk to different locations to fight the alien technology. It's really cool. But you'll see that the primary focus is the map, because it's a game about walking to places. You have to be able to do that, which means you have to be able to see the map. So the map is ginormous. And then of secondary focus and tertiary focus, we have some of the data at the bottom, and of course the button here at the top. And again, if we look at the proportion, you'll see that the map takes up a huge amount of space. It's very, very important here. If we think about a work culture example, proportion is important. If you're a designer, you would probably be okay working somewhere where your entry-level junior design job makes about 65% of what the full, advanced designers make. But if you go to a job interview and they say, yeah, our designers make 100K, but you're going to make 10K, you would not be happy because the proportion is off. So we can bring proportion into how we design systems like pay scales if we're HR managers or we're working on creating a work culture, which is a type of design. Creating a work culture is you have to design it. Let's look at a photo example. This is a photograph of a prisoner in Sierra Leone. It's a photo series on teenagers who've been imprisoned. And if we look at the proportion, again, it's kind of like the Nicolette example. The vast proportion of what we see is the cell, and that is made to emphasize the importance of confinement to this picture. This picture is about the character, the subject here, but what it's about him is confinement. Confinement is the sense we're supposed to get. So most of what we see here is the picture of confinement. And then we see him much smaller. That also emphasizes the smallness of his agency, the smallness, what he's been reduced to. He's been reduced to a prisoner in this awful cell to just sit there all day. So the proportion emphasizes confinement. It emphasizes the loss of agency and the loss of kind of holding space in the world. Here's another example. Here we have proportion to create focus. The car in the front is much larger than the car in the back, so clearly this is the car we're supposed to focus on. Okay, we're getting towards the end. Balance. Anything that draws the eye has what we call visual weight. I've found that this is one of the hardest design principles to grasp because visual weight is very conceptual. Larger, more focused on elements tend to have more visual weight. Balance is about distributing that weight evenly across the composition. Most people think balance is about making something completely symmetrical, but that is not true. You can have good balance in something that's not symmetrical. So in this example, it's kind of symmetrical, but not quite. And what I've done is I've highlighted, I skipped ahead a little bit. I've highlighted the areas of visual weight. So I just highlighted everything that draws your eye that you might look at. You'll notice I didn't highlight the sky with clouds because that is the ground and everything else is a figure. I didn't highlight the blue sea because again, it's a ground and there's figures on top of it. So Gestalt theory is at play here. If I fill in those areas of visual weight, you'll see that there's about an equal amount on the left as there is on the right. And if I rearrange it, you'll see it's about the same. Now it looks like there's more on this side because this is taller, but this side actually extends out more, so it is actually about equal, the same amount of weight on the left as we have on the right. Another way of thinking about this is to kind of break it up and figure out what balances with what. So if we look at the ship, it's perfectly symmetrical, really. It's right down the center of the page. There's as much ship on the left as there is on the right, so that's even. Then we have text. Well, there's 2 columns of text here and 3 here. So there's more weight on this side, but they balanced it by putting the title and the subhead on this side. So this extra column is balanced out by this. And then they have a little tugboat right here. That adds more visual weight to the right, and they've balanced it with the similarly sized submarine over here on the left. So we end up with equal amounts. If we look at mobile apps, this is a screenshot from a Reddit app, Reddit News I think it's called, and if I split it down the center and I highlight the areas of visual weight, you'll see that it's about equal on the left and right, but here's where balance gets a little bit confusing. Clearly there's more boxes on the left than the right. The boxes on the left are bigger, but these boxes represent photos, and those photos have a lot more going on and they have more visual weight. Those photos are much more eye-attracting than the text over here. So when I rearranged it, I made the photos a darker color because they have more weight. This would be like stacking, the text is like 5-pound weight and the photos are like a 10 or 15-pound weight because they're more visually interesting and they draw the eye more. So if you were to put this on a scale, it would balance. In work culture, you might have balance by fairness. So if you work at a restaurant, for example, and you steal money, you get fired, right? That seems appropriate. If you forget to sign a document of medium importance, do you also get fired? If you do get fired, that doesn't seem to have balance. That doesn't seem fair. If you get written up, that seems like an appropriate response, right? So you can have balance in the design of your work culture as well. Let's just look at a couple photo examples and then this lecture will be finished. Photo composition. This is an image of a woman who is finding out that she's being evicted, like today, and the police are there to take all of her stuff out. And if we split it down the center, you'll see that we have equal visual weight on the left and right. So this woman is closer to us. She has more emotion that draws our eye, and we have more visual weight there. The cop is a little smaller, but he's also standing in a more brightly lit area with a yellow background. So even though he is smaller, he picks up some visual weight because the yellow is very eye-catching. So we have equal weight on the left and right. This example is much more symmetrical, traditionally balanced. If we split it down the center, again, equal on the left and right. We have about the same number of people sitting on the left as we have on the right. This is a more traditional symmetrical balance. That's everything I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions about the design principles, please feel free to send them my way, but I look forward to seeing your assignments this week and seeing how you deal with the design principles in your photo compositions.